Welcome to Dark Broadcast. Stay quiet and stay aware.
The Silent Blessing. Dear recorder, if this tape is ever found, my name is Leo Morris. I was a journalist. Now I'm not sure who I am. I came here to this godforsaken place called Hopewell to find my younger brother Ethan, and I found something that makes me want to forget my own name. Ethan disappeared 6 months ago. His last message was brief: found the truth. They call it the Silent Blessing. Here in Hopewell, it's peace. His typical spiritual search had gone too far. The police shrugged, a grown man left voluntarily. But I felt something was wrong, and so I am here on a dusty road leading into the Appalachian woods with a recorder in my pocket and a camera on the back seat. The first thing that struck me was the silence, not the rural kind full of crickets and barking dogs, but an oppressive, absolute silence, as if sound had been sucked out of the world with a syringe. The houses, neat with painted porches, stood with curtains drawn. Not a soul. The air smelled of damp earth and a Swedish rot, like a bouquet forgotten in a vase for a week. I met him at the community house. Old Ezra, rocking in a rocking chair as if he was waiting for me. His smile was wide, but his eyes were flat and empty, like two pieces of slate. "Ah, Ethan's brother," he said, and chills ran down my spine. I hadn't introduced myself. He has found what he was seeking, peace. Where is he? I need to see him. All in good time. You are tired, stay. Tomorrow everything will become clear. I didn't like that become clear, but arguing was pointless. They put me up in a tiny cottage. At night, I tried to film the street, but the lens was flooded with a strange glow, as if the fog wasn't just water but something else. And I felt stares, dozens of pairs of eyes watching from behind those impenetrable curtains. Morning brought no clarity. Ezra, sitting in the same spot as if he hadn't moved all night, began a lecture without preamble. We are the society of the silent blessing. The world is noisy. It is full of pain, the pain of desires, memory, attachments. Our teaching is simple. To be filled with true peace, one must empty the jug, renounce the self, renounce everything that causes suffering, renounce the noise, renounce memory. My heart sank to my stomach. I pressed the record button. Where is Ethan? In the house of blessing, but I warn you, he has attained silence. Do not disturb it. The House of Blessing turned out to be an old church with an inverted cross on the spire, not as a challenge, but as a symbol of renunciation. Inside, it smelled of incense and dust. Dozens of people in gray robes sat on the benches. They weren't praying. They weren't singing. They just sat staring into the space before them. Their eyes, there was nothing in them. No thought, no curiosity, no light. It was an exhibition of empty vessels. And then I saw him, in the front row, Ethan. His posture was perfectly straight, his face calm like the surface of a dead lake. He wore the same gray robe. Ethan, my echo rolled loudly under the vaults. He slowly turned his head. His gaze slid over me, not lingering. There was not a spark of recognition. "Ethan, it's me, Leo. Wake up." I grabbed his shoulder. The body was warm but felt inert, like a mannequin's. "No more pain," he said in an even mechanical tone. "The noise is gone. Only the blessing remains." "What pain are you talking about?" "Attachment is pain. Memory is pain. Leo, it's just noise. Noise that must be silenced." He said my name, but as if reading an unfamiliar word on a sign, without a hint of feeling. They hadn't brainwashed him. They had scraped his mind clean, burned away everything that made him Ethan, his doubts, his dreams, his love, his stupid laugh. Everything that was pain and joy they declared a flaw and removed, left only a quiet, functioning shell. Ezra appeared beside me like a shadow. You see, he is perfect, does not suffer, does not desire, does not yearn. We have freed him. You killed the person in him, I burst out. We have relieved him of suffering, and he wants you to stay. He said you also carry pain, the pain of loss, loneliness. We can help you get rid of it. There was no threat in his voice. There was a chilling certainty, and I understood the terrible truth. They weren't classic murderous cultists. They were offering an end to suffering, final and irrevocable, at the cost of everything that makes you a person. It was spiritual euthanasia. I ran out of the church. Someone had already approached my car. All 4 tires were slashed. Hopewell had awoken. People came out of the houses. They didn't come at me with clubs. They just came out and watched, silently. Their silence was louder than any scream. I retreated to my cottage, slammed the door. They didn't break in. They waited, like a gardener who knows the weed will wither on its own. I spent 2 days in the cottage. They walked outside, quietly. No sound of voices, no arguments, only the shuffling of soles on the ground. I tried to leave through the woods but ran into a tall, old, yet incredibly sturdy fence with barbed wire on top. Hopewell wasn't a village, it was a pen. When I returned, exhausted, to the outskirts, Ezra was waiting for me with several men. The woods are dangerous, he said with almost fatherly concern. Come back, rest. This morning the knock on the door repeated, persistent but quiet. Ezra said, it is time to receive the blessing. Ethan is waiting. I look out the window. I see my brother. He walks with them, eats, breathes, but he is not there. And the darkest, most shameful thought gnaws at me from within. When my own pain from losing my brother, from fear, from hopelessness becomes unbearable, their offer begins to sound reasonable, just to stop feeling, to give up oneself in exchange for this silent, terrible peace. They are not evil, they sincerely believe, and their faith, offering a simple way out, turned out to be stronger than my love, which demands an eternal struggle. Ethan, forgive me. I cannot save you. To save you, I would have to force you back into the world of suffering. Do I have that right? And will I have the strength to fight when the whisper inside grows louder? Give up, fall silent, attain the blessing. I am leaving this recorder in the chimney. If someone finds it, do not look for Hopewell, and do not look for us. Because the most terrible thing is not a monster that tears you apart. It is the quiet door you yourself begin to want to enter, just to finally stop being afraid. The recording ends with a quiet, ragged sigh, fading into absolute silence.
At what point do you think everything became impossible to change? I'd like to hear different opinions.
Don't stop no matter what you hear. Hi everyone. I don't usually post stuff like this. My life was boringly normal until last weekend when everything went to hell. I still can't believe it, but I need to get it off my chest. I need someone to know what happened to Mike and what's happening to me. Mike and I have been friends since kindergarten. Typical American guys. Friday night football, cheap beer, summer hikes. Mike was always a bit bigger, a bit stronger, a bit wilder than me. In school they called him Grizzly, not for being mean, but for his build and that mane of chestnut hair. He was the guy you went into the mountains with if you wanted to feel safe. That's why I agreed so easily when he suggested a hike on the Appalachian Trail in November. Just a couple of days, Chris, he said. One last trip before winter, fresh air, no people. I, of course, gave him crap about it like we're not masochists, but he insisted. There was something obsessive in his eyes, like he desperately needed to get out of the city. Now I understand. We drove deep into Maine. The forest was already knee-deep in snow, the sky a leaden blanket. The forecast was bad, but Mike just frowned and grumbled, "We'll make it." He was surprisingly jumpy. The whole drive from Boston, he stared silently out the window, clenching and unclenching his fists. The first day was okay. Cold but bearable. We walked, joked, reminisced about old times. But by evening, Mike grew withdrawn. He kept glancing at the sky, at his watch. I asked what was wrong and he brushed me off. "Just a storm coming. Need to find a good spot for camp." We found a relatively sheltered spot among some rocks. While I was building the fire, Mike paced nervously around the perimeter like a caged animal. "Listen, Chris," he finally said, his voice uncharacteristically serious. "If something goes wrong, if we get lost, you have to promise me something." "We won't get lost, man. We have GPS," I tried to joke. "Promise?" His growl made me flinch. He rarely talked to me like that. "No matter what happens, no matter what you hear or see, you don't stop. You run, straight ahead and don't look back, got it?" I looked at his broad, tense face lit by the fire. There was real animal fear in his eyes. "Okay," I said, my voice tight. "I promise." He nodded, but no relief appeared on his face. That night the storm hit us in earnest. It wasn't just a snowstorm, it was some kind of biblical fury. The wind howled like it wanted to rip the rocks from the ground. We got in the tent, but sleep was impossible. Mike tossed and turned, his breathing ragged, wheezing. Sometimes he groaned as if in pain. "Mike, you okay?" I asked over the wind's howl. "Shut up and sleep," he hissed. "Just sleep." I tried, but I couldn't. Through the noise of the blizzard, I thought I heard another sound. A distant, drawn-out howl. Not a wolf's. Something bigger, something emptier. A cold, inexplicable, primal terror gripped me. Morning brought a nightmare, complete whiteness. Snow had buried everything, the trail, the gullies, the rocks. Our GPS was silent, the phone screen dead. We were trapped. Mike seemed to have been expecting this. He was pale but focused. His nervousness had evaporated, replaced by grim determination. "We're moving. Now," he ordered, not looking at me. We trudged for hours. The snow blinded us. The wind tore at our clothes. I walked in Mike's footsteps, his powerful back my only landmark in this white hell. He moved with unnatural ease, as if he knew every bump under the snow. That's when I started noticing the strangeness. He sniffed the air too often, turning his head like a wild animal. His movements became sharper, more angular. And his eyes, Mike's light brown eyes, always so warm, seemed to have lightened almost to yellow when the light caught them. We found a half-collapsed hunting shack closer to evening. It wasn't salvation, just a reprieve. The door hung on one hinge, the window was boarded up, but the roof was intact. Inside was barely warmer than outside, but at least there was no wind. Mike immediately blocked the hole in the door with a piece of the broken cupboard. His hands were shaking. "Tonight," he whispered, more to himself than to me. "Tonight's the full moon. Through the clouds, it'll break through." "What will break through, Mike?" I asked, my voice betraying me with a tremor. He looked at me, and in his gaze was such bottomless anguish it hurt me physically. "I didn't want this, Chris. I swear to God I didn't. I thought I could control it. I thought we'd make it in time." "Control what? What the hell are you talking about?" I shouted. He clutched his head. His knuckles turned white. "Last year on that trip when I went missing for 3 days, I was bit. I didn't see what it was. Darkness, claws, teeth, but since then, something's been living inside me. Every month it gets worse. I hear voices in my head, I smell things from a mile away. And on the full moon, he trailed off, swallowing. I was supposed to leave, alone, but I was scared of what would happen to me alone. And I thought with you I'd be safer for you, because I'd rather die than hurt you. Piece by piece, the puzzle was assembling in my head. His obsessiveness, his fear, his request to run. The American urban legends we'd watched as kids suddenly became a terrifying reality. A werewolf, I breathed out. The word sounded ridiculous and yet horrifyingly plausible. He just nodded, his face buried in his knees. Why didn't you tell me? And what would you have done? Believed me, called the men in white coats. He gave a bitter laugh. No, the best way to protect you was to know nothing. And now it's too late. Outside, the wind died down. Through a break in the clouds, the moon peered through. A shimmering, ghostly light fell through the broken window. It fell on Mike. He groaned, clutching his chest. His body began to shake with convulsions. Chris, his voice grew hoarse, deep, not entirely human anymore. Run now, remember your promise. I can't leave you, I screamed. You can't help me, his roar deafened me. He straightened up. His bones began making that sound they describe in books, a dry, crackling sound like breaking branches. His shoulders broadened, tearing his jacket. His face elongated, his ears sharpened and crawled up his skull. And his scream, it turned into that same howl I'd heard the night before. But now it was 10 times louder and just a couple of meters away. I froze, paralyzed with horror, watching my best friend disappear, replaced by a nightmarish hybrid of man and wolf. He was enormous. Fur burst through his skin, claws scrabbled on the rotten floor. His eyes, now completely yellow without a hint of reason, fixed on me. There was only hungry rage in them. He snarled and took a step toward me. And in that last moment in those eyes I saw it. A flicker of struggle, a spark of the real Mike. His maw twitched and he lunged away from me, smashing his shoulder into the shack wall with such force the whole structure shuddered. Run, he rasped in his new, terrible voice, in which a shred of his human will still smolder. And I ran. I burst out the door and sprinted blindly into the night, into the snow. I ran like I've never run in my life. Behind me came a furious roar, the sound of splintering wood, and then heavy, fast footsteps. He was coming after me. I didn't look back, I just ran as I'd promised. Branches whipped my face, snow packed into my boots. I heard his breathing, ragged, whistling, getting closer. And then I stumbled. My foot found a hole under the snow. I heard a sickening crunch in my ankle, and with a cry, I tumbled down a slope. Pain shot through me, sharp and burning. I rolled into a small ravine and hit my head on a rock. My consciousness swam. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was a huge dark figure at the edge of the ravine. It stood still, looking down at me. Then it emitted a low, guttural sound and vanished into the darkness of the forest. Rescuers found me in the morning. As it turned out later, we were only 3 miles from the highway. They said I was lucky. Falling into the ravine saved me. Otherwise, I would have frozen to death. I told them nothing about Mike, nothing about his transformation. I said we got lost. The blizzard caught us and we decided to split up to look for help. An old, worn-out lie. They nodded with understanding faces. The search for your friend is ongoing, they said. But I knew the truth. The search was pointless. A week has passed. My leg is in a cast. I'm back at work, back to life. But I don't sleep. Every night I wake up in a cold sweat from the sound of that cracking and that howl. And this morning, scrolling through news on my phone, I came across a short article. Local farmers in that area of Maine are complaining about livestock attacks. Something or someone has been tearing apart sheep and cows with inhuman strength. Witnesses talked about a huge wolf, much larger than normal. But one detail made my heart stop. The reporter wrote that at the scene of one attack, in the mud next to bloody paw prints, they found a scrap of fabric, red flannel fabric, the exact kind Mike's shirt was made from. He's alive. The monster my friend became is still out there, and it's killing because I didn't stop him, because I ran. But that's not the worst part. Today, taking a shower, I saw on my shoulder, right below the collarbone, several long, thin scratches, the kind that might be left if someone was grazed by a claw. I don't remember him scratching me, but I remember falling, and him looking down into the ravine. And then I caught myself looking at my hands. My joints, they ache a little. And last night when I ordered a pepperoni pizza, it seemed to smell rancid to me. I threw it out. It's probably just paranoia, stress, PTSD like my therapist says. But tonight I went out to take the trash and instinctively looked up at the sky. Through the city's light pollution, the moon was visible, almost full. And I felt not rage, not hunger. I felt longing, an all-consuming, lonely longing that made me want to howl. Promise me, Chris, no matter what happens, don't stop. But where do you run from yourself?
If this happened in your own life, what would be the scariest part? Share your thoughts.
Catalog of Forgotten Words. Hi everyone, my name is Alice and I work as a librarian at the old Carnegie Public Library in a provincial town somewhere in New England. You know, one of those temples of knowledge built with a steel magnate's money a century ago. It smells of dust, old pages, and silence, broken only by the creaking of oak floors. I love this job. It's peaceful, predictable, or at least it was until last month. The library has a rare books and special collections department, a small, locked room on the second floor, accessible to outsiders only by prior appointment. It houses local newspapers from 100 years ago, a few battered incunabula, and most importantly, a collection of manuscripts and first editions by local authors who never became famous. It all started with that room. The first warning sign was what I called the displaced dust phenomenon. Every morning, unlocking the room, I noticed that several books in the manuscript section were not in their places. Not that there was a mess. No, they had been neatly extracted from the stacks and laid out on the large oak reading table. The stacks of other books around them were in perfect order, but the ones on the table had noticeably less dust on them, as if someone had been carefully studying them. I chalked it up to my own forgetfulness. Maybe I got distracted yesterday and didn't put them away, but a week later it happened again. And again 2 days after that, always in the manuscripts section. I checked the visitor log. No one had signed up for the room the day before. I spoke to the cleaner, Mrs. Higgins, an elderly and very conscientious woman. She swore she never goes in there without me because she's afraid of damaging something. It became scary. Thoughts of a vandal or a thief wouldn't leave me alone. What if someone was hiding in the library after closing? I decided to act. The next evening, pretending to leave, I hid in the tiny broom closet for mops and cleaning supplies, from where I could see the entire rare books hall through the keyhole. My heart was pounding in my throat. I sat there for several hours in complete darkness, listening to every creak and rustle of the old building. And then I heard it. Not footsteps, not the sound of a door opening. It was a faint, barely perceptible rustling, like someone turning thin, brittle pages. The rustling came from right behind the closet door, from the rare books room itself. I almost suffocated from fear. I was the last one to leave. I had personally checked all the locks. No one could be in there. Slowly, with trembling hands, I opened the closet door and peered out. Pale street lamp light fell into the rare books hall through a tall, arched window, and at the large table sat a shadow. It was not a human figure. It was a coagulation of deeper darkness, a silhouette devoid of details. Its outline resembled a person hunched over a book, but its edges quivered and blurred like smoke. Long, thin, almost incorporeal fingers of this gloom were turning the pages of an old folio. I heard no breathing, only that cursed, incessant rustling. I don't remember how I got out of the closet and ran. I don't remember unlocking the main door. I only remember the chilling cold emanating from that figure and the feeling of absolute, all-consuming melancholy that washed over me in a wave. The next day, I didn't go to work, said I was sick. I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination, a product of fatigue and an overactive imagination, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I returned 2 days later. The room was in its usual state, several books neatly arranged on the table. But now, knowing their reader, I looked at them differently. I decided to examine what kind of books they were. They were all from the same collection, the literary heritage of Harmon Graves. Graves was a local writer who lived at the turn of the 20th century. He published a couple of obscure novels and a bunch of stories in local newspapers. According to archival records, he died in 1923 from pneumonia. No family, no close friends. His whole life had been reduced to these few boxes of papers. And then I found it, his unfinished work. It lay in a separate worn cardboard folder, not cataloged. Inside was a thick stack of written pages. The title on the first page read, "Chronicles of the Salt Wind." It was a novel, a draft, but it stopped mid-sentence on page 75. The last words were, "And the captain saw the shore." Nothing more, emptiness. And then it hit me, this wasn't a vandal, this wasn't an evil spirit. This was him, Harmon Graves. His ghost was tethered to this place, to his last, unfinished work. He couldn't find peace. Every night he returned to search for, what? Inspiration, lost pages, a way to finish the story he wasn't allowed to complete in life. The eerie fear slowly began to give way to a strange, perverse pity. Imagine being trapped for eternity with one single, unfulfillable desire, not to take revenge, not to find peace, but simply to put a period. I began to notice other things. The temperature in the rare books room was now consistently a few degrees lower than in the rest of the library. Sometimes, out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement, a shadow sliding between the shelves. The rustle of pages became almost a familiar background sound during my evening rounds. It wasn't trying to harm me, it just was there, searching. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I stayed after closing, sat at that very oak table, and took out the folder with Chronicles of the Salt Wind. I placed it right in the middle of the table. "Mr. Graves," I said into the silence, my voice trembling, I want to help." Nothing happened. The silence only grew louder. I felt like an idiot. But the next morning, the folder lay open. The draft was neatly spread out, and on top of it lay an old fountain pen I hadn't seen before. It was cold as ice. Thus began our strange symbiosis. I became his editor, his link to the world of the living. In the evenings, I would lay out his manuscript and sit nearby. I brought him books on seamanship. His novel was set on a ship, historical chronicles, thesauruses. I read his draft aloud, trying to understand his style, to catch the rhythm. Sometimes, leaving the manuscript overnight, I would find new words written in the margins in dark, almost faded ink the next morning. New ideas, dialogue options. He was working, slowly, agonizingly slowly, but he was making progress. I got to know him better through his writing. He was melancholic, prone to lyrical digressions. His hero, Captain Elias Van Horn, was just as lonely and lost as the author himself, sailing into the unknown in search of a mythical island. But something was wrong. The new ideas were good, but they didn't connect. They were variations on already written themes. He had hit a creative dead end, and even death hadn't freed him from it. He was trapped by his own unfinished business. One night, as I sat with his manuscript, it dawned on me, the last sentence, "And the captain saw the shore." What if he wasn't supposed to see land? What if the whole point was the journey, not the arrival? What if he was meant to accept his fate as an eternal wanderer? With enthusiasm, I grabbed a pencil. I was afraid to touch his pen, and on a blank sheet of paper wrote several ending options. And the captain saw the shore of his dreams melt into the fog and understood that his home was the sea, eternal and infinite. And the captain saw the shore but turned the helm, guiding his ship back into the embrace of the storm, for only there did he feel alive. I left the sheet on the table and left, my heart pounding with hope. For the first time, I felt I could truly help him, give him peace. The next morning, I rushed into the rare books room. The sheet with my suggestions lay in place, but it wasn't just ignored. It was mutilated. Dark, furious ink crossed out my words with such force that the paper was torn in several places. Next to it, in a different hand, sharp, angular, was written a single word. No. The air in the room was icy. I felt not just disappointment, I felt anger, a wave of despair and rage emanating from the very room. The shadow in the corner of the room thickened, became denser, darker. For the first time, I felt a threat emanating from it. He didn't want my sympathy. He didn't want philosophical resolutions. He wanted to finish his story the way he had intended. And I, alive, breathing with my stupid ideas, had only reminded him that he could not do it. Ever. After that incident, everything changed. Our fragile alliance fell apart. The cold in the room became piercing. The books were now not just laid on the table, they were thrown on the floor. One day I found a glass on the table shattered as if it had been thrown down with great force. The rustle of pages became sharp, tearing. He wasn't angry at the library, he was angry at himself, at his inability. And this rage, born of creative impotence, began to spill out. Yesterday evening, I walked into the room and froze. The Chronicles of the Salt Wind manuscript lay on the table, but it wasn't right. The pages were covered in continuous, meaningless scribbles. Dark, insane squiggles covered every centimeter of the paper, mimicking writing but carrying no meaning. It was a scream of a soul that had forgotten how to speak. And in the middle of this chaos, on the very top of the stack, lay his fountain pen. It was snapped in half. I understood everything. He couldn't just not finish the novel. He had forgotten it. He had forgotten the words, forgotten the plot, forgotten his characters. Eternity in confinement had erased his mind, leaving only pure, inexpressible despair over an unfulfilled duty. He had become a slave to an idea whose meaning he had long since lost. I no longer try to help him. I can't. I just come in the morning and carefully arrange his ruined manuscript on the table. I place books around it, creating the appearance of work. I maintain the ritual because that's all he has left. Sometimes, late in the evening, walking past the locked door, I hear a soft sound. It's not the rustle of pages. It's a quiet, broken weeping that comes from everywhere and nowhere at once. So yes, a ghost lives in my library, and this isn't a scary story. It's the saddest story I know, because his unfinished business isn't just an unfinished book, it's an unfinished life. And his punishment is an eternity spent in futile attempts to remember what he wanted to say and the realization that the words are forever lost. And I'm just a librarian cataloging his eternal despair every day.
If you felt something shift inside you tonight, share it. It helps keep the signal clear. We'll continue right after.